Hey everyone, it's Matthew. So we're looking at episode 1 of Arcane. And the real question is here, how do you design an episode that really drags in as many people as possible? Now, you look at this, Arcane is basically based off a video game, League of Legends. So most of the people who are interested, who are big fans of League of Legends, will of course watch this particular animation. I mean, no big deal. But then you're going to have other types of people. You're going to have people who are interested in science fiction, fantasy in general, and will probably give this show a chance. And there'll be probably some people who are, interested in Japanese animation, or at least stuff that, is created by Don Bluth. Probably not Disney because it's a little different. And then you have the normal people, just normal. And the question is, how do you get as many people into watching the series as possible? Now, what Netflix did was to actually throw out 3 episodes at once. So what you need to do, at least for the first episode, is move things along enough that the person will want to watch the next 2 episodes. That's all you need to do. And the 3rd episode just does a wonderful job of really just pounding you. It's like there's a wonderful payoff there. And just incredible emotional conclusion at the end of Act 1 that makes you want to watch the rest of it. So we have to look at here at the setup of the first episode so you can get interested in watching the other 2. And I find that it does an excellent job of doing that. So first off, let's just look at the absolutely fabulous visual storytelling that is actually going on here. So first off, the first 3 minutes of Arcane just starts off with a little bit of music, a girl is singing, and there is no dialogue whatsoever. We start off with a view of the bridge from below. So this is kind of a staging shot here that you could kind of say that basically from the point of view of the people who are living down below underneath the bridge. And what's going on is obviously a huge tragedy. There's a fire going on and stuff, and the music is really sad, and there's a girl singing, which is kind of fascinating. So you have this huge gap. The song itself is not terribly tragic in any particular way, but the way it's handled is there's a lot of tragedy. And of course, what's going on in the scene, you see, the fire and the death and everything. Then the first person that you actually see is this shot right here. A guy falls down. This particular character comes in, shoots the guy. It's incredibly brutal scene here. And then you get a close-up of just what looks probably, for all intents and purposes, someone coming out of like the Terminator or Darth Vader or someone really, really evil dude coming out. Now, for the opening scene here, the kind of the child song and the whole atmosphere, I get really strong Jinro vibes. But in any case, whether you're interested in Japanese animation or just storytelling in general, it's like this is very clear. This is a bad dude. We're dealing with serious evil that's going to happen in this world. It's a very scary world that we have to deal with. Okay, so we've kind of had that as the establishing shot, and as it moves forward, we are introduced to 2 characters who we'll probably assume are going to be 2 of the main characters for the rest of the series. Obviously distraught. And what's really wonderful is there's no narration. There is no narration whatsoever. You see them, and then they see a character in the distance who is just pounding the crap out of some other person, which we assume is one of the enforcers with a gun. And the guy comes up to them, and obviously the older sister is scared for her life. You see the scene where the older sister grabs the younger sister's hand, squeezes it, and pushes the younger sister back. You see the guy come up to her. You see the older sister gesture, and then the guy nods, and then points towards off screen, and then you see the older girl look at a dead body, and it's probably their mother, so their parents are dead in this particular episode. So obviously you see the anguish, the crying, everything, and just like it's total emotional scene, and of course the music is right there, just like there's tragedy going on here, people. There's one thing about this, like if you really don't know how to feel about this episode, the music will definitely tell you. And then you see here where the guy is like, previously he was like, gung-ho, really mad and just beating some people up, but looks at the tragedy around him. He throws his gloves down and he picks the girls up and he carries them away. So it's at this point you can kind of see that he realizes the consequence of what had happened, and probably regrets this particular conflict. But you also see in the very next scene here is that she is like on his shoulder and obviously upset, angry. You can see the anger just pouring out of her eyes as we go from this face to the shot up to a wonderful shot of Piltover here, which we later find out that's what it's called. So this is going to be a conflict between the Undercity and Piltover. All of that is just pretty much set up in the first 3 minutes. We understand, okay, it's going to be a story about two girls, possibly their father, we find an adopted father in this case, and their struggle with the city on the hill. That is the initial thing. So all of this done in 3 minutes, not a word that's being said by any of the characters. And just like, wow, there is a lot done in these first three minutes that if you're someone who is interested in good storytelling, you're like, I need to see the end of this and how the rest of this is going to go. Now, for the rest of the people, they're probably just going, wow, this is visually stunning. This is like really told very well. And that would be fine. Now, we want to move on from there to this shot. So this is after the opening theme is finished. And it's of course another wonderful visual shot of the city of Piltover. And basically the whole job of this particular scene is kind of move things forward and really set up the events to cause conflict between topside and downside. Plus, while we're at it, to establish the characters. So in this case, what we see as the four characters move across the rooftops, you see Vi is kind of the more, I guess, proactive, aggressive type. Milo is more the cocky type. And Clagger is more the gentle giant who eats a cupcake type. And then you have Powder, who's less confident and younger and weaker than the other four characters. And what is wonderful in this scene is actually when Powder almost falls off the roof, but Vi gets her and kind of acts nonchalantly, which actually you may think is kind of callous, but it's like that calms Powder down if you think about it. Probably because Powder's looking up to Vi as sort of a big sister, mother type of role. So it's like, how should I react to that? It's no big deal. Just move on. Because of course she was like really scared. So that was kind of, if you notice that was a wonderful scene in and of itself. And then we move from that to going actually into the burglary. They go in and they try to take all the stuff, and then there's an explosion. So we pretty much set up the initial conflict here. If the building is going to be blown up, then the authorities are going to be very concerned about what has happened. And of course, there's a whole chase scene between them and the cops basically here. Now, what's really interesting here is that the cops topside don't have guns. They got these little throwy things that they go and chase. So obviously, the cops who normally police the topside or Piltover part, I guess this area, and the cops that are usually sent down to the Undercity are different types. So that's kind of something that needs to be kept in mind, because the uniforms are slightly different as well. So it's like, oh, this is a little bit more complicated what's going on here. But it kind of gives you an idea of the world that's going on. And then after that, the kids, of course, escape, and they run into, another gang. So it's like, oh, okay. So basically in this world is the kind of place across the bridge is a little bit more dangerous, because even though they got away from the cops on the other side of the bridge, they still have to contend with local gangs who want their piece of the pie there. And what ends up happening is basically they have a fight, and again, it's kind of shown fairly clearly here that Clogger, the guy in the background there, is pretty strong because he can handle 2 guys, and Vise is one who's really good with her fists, though she gets sucker punched once. And Milo's an okay fighter, and Powder just kind of loses all the stuff that they stole, so she gets blamed for it. So you can see the inner dynamics of this team, as well as the various characters of these people through the various scenes that happen at top here. So it gives you a really good idea of who these characters are as you move along. No, and that's kind of just wonderful. And then from there, as they finish that, then you get these wide shots of what the Undercity is like. So as they kind of go down the elevator and they walk slowly to the last drop, you just see these wonderful scenes of what the Undercity looks like. This is a huge contrast between the open, the brightness, the clear lines, compared to this, which is kind of like dank and moldy and built over kind of area. This huge contrast, which just visually is just well done. And not only that, so once we move on to the bar scene, I mean, all the bar scene here is to basically establish that Vander is a good guy. I mean, all we saw was that he took the 2 girls back with him, and of course he was kind of unhappy with the whole situation. But now you see here he apparently is in charge of this area. He says, "Welcome to the lane." So now we have a name for what we're seeing here. Good job there. And there's a wonderful thing here that when you first watch this, you don't notice it, but the whole scene where he talks to them and the woman there doesn't actually say anything, but agrees by taking his pipe, is going to be a scene that will be paralleled by another character in another episode. So there's like a whole bunch of stuff that is kind of set up here that just gets paid off in other episodes. In fact, a wonderful part about Arcane is the setup and payoff, and there are so many things well done that are set up beforehand, if you notice, and that are paid off. Just wonderful. That the ones that are set up and not paid off stand out a little bit, which I'll talk about in a different video. So we have that. I just like that scene because what happens later there's a slight callback to this. Then we have this scene where Vander is talking to his kids, and this just clearly shows how good of a parent Vander is, and how well he can discipline each of his kids, or at least treat them slightly differently. You know, he has to talk with Vi, which works very well in her particular situation, the way he deals with Milo, the way he calls Clagger up. So all of this is he kind of slightly deals with and disciplines the various characters in different ways that are appropriate for what happened. And that's kind of a scene if you're a father or a parent, you know, you look at this like, oh, that's very well done. And then we move from there to Benzo's shop. And what is wonderful about this scene is up until this point, we've kind of had a fairly normal progression. And we really haven't given a bone to the League of Legends fandom there. So this episode where Benzo is basically a shop where all kinds of gadgets and trinkets are basically bought and sold, you get a chance to see all kinds of items there that people who are very familiar with the League of Legends would notice. And so it's like, oh, that's the thing, and that's the thing, and that's the thing. So it kind of gets them excited. And if you really don't know anything about what's going on about that, here's the Screen Rant video. That'll mention all the items that were shown. So what I think is really well done here. So we've done it. We've done the first 3 minutes. People who are really interested in the story are pretty much hooked at that point. Most of the normal people are like, oh, this is kind of very interesting and moving along. It's very clear of, you know, who the bad guy, obviously Piltover's the bad guy is, because, you know, these people here are just kind of, they're living, you know, a really tough place. It's, you know, they're being oppressed in some unknown manner, which actually creates a couple of questions that I want to address in a different video. is like, there's all kinds of things that I wish they'd kind of fleshed out. But then the cops come in, and this kind of creates a little bit of a gray area. So if you remember way back in the opening scene, like, oh, this is very similar. The helmet is very similar. The symbol and the kind of the uniform and everything just looks very similar. And of course, the mask is very similar. And it also kind of gives you an idea that why are they wearing these masks? Now, obviously, these are gas masks of some sort. So it becomes a little bit obvious later on. But of course, the whole area of the lanes, the fissures is another name is given to this place, is that the air is kind of polluted. So the people at top are not used to the air in this place, so they wear these masks. And it's like, oh, so what's going on here? And while Market just seems like a complete idiot, an arrogant prick, the other character, the person who's actually in charge, Grayson, seems to be a more pragmatic person. So what we see here is there's some sort of deal between Grayson and Vander so that the enforcers, I guess the police force in this particular world, do not come into the lanes and screw things up. And as part of that bargain, then Vander makes sure that his people don't go out into Pilter and steal stuff. So there's kind of an uneasy truce, kind of non-aggression pact that is going on. That unfortunately, because of the explosion at the very beginning of this episode, was kind of broken. So they have to figure out a way to fix this. So obviously, the people at top will want some sort of sacrifice of some sort. So this creates the conflict between top side and the bottom side. But even though the first image from the very beginning of this episode is like, okay, these guys are pure evil. You know, they brutally killed one person. It's like, not everyone is like that. So we've kind of been drawn to a little bit of complexity here. Okay, so these people are maybe not like 100% the bad guys. So, okay. Now, in the first episode, just to bring in most normal people, is people tend to like very clear black and white situations. So at least at the very beginning, you're going to have that. So, okay, these aren't the bad guys, and who are really the bad guys? And this episode does a really good job of making that clear a little bit later. But before we get to that, you basically have this like nice, heartwarming conversation between Vi and Powder about how people make mistakes. And it's just a question of, everyone has bad days, we learn from them, and we stick together. So that's wonderful. And of course, because there's a whole conversation that Powder had conveniently overheard that hurt her feelings, and so it creates a little bit of a wedge between them. And Vi does a really good job of fixing that. So again, you see this kind of relationship between the two, these little character moments here that is just really good at fleshing out not only Vi and Powder, but the other two, Milo and Clagger as well, and what's going on in this world. It's just a nice, heartwarming scene that after we finish that, then we gotta change, and we thrown in right to the bad guy. And this is wonderful here because like, if you were to like show, okay, this is the big bad guy, you couldn't have done it any better. Of like have the guy start off in the shadows with this glowing eye of menace. I mean, the voice acting here is just like arrogance, menace. It's just like oozing just right out of the voice. And what the character does is just obvious to see this guy is just like big trouble. And then you're shown the doctor. So obviously the typical mad scientist type of guy, and he's got some sort of liquid that kind of seems evilish because of the coloring and everything. It's like kind of an evil, dark, purplish type of thing. So which is interesting. Like if it was like a green or orange or blue or something, it probably people would have a different opinion on it. But it's kind of like this kind of malevolent purple type of thing. And then of course what happens is basically a cat gets killed. Now there's a kind of a typical trope. If you've ever read any of the books on basically writing for plays or movies, it's like save the cat. And where the good guy, does something very nice to save the cat. But in this case, the episode, they kill the cat. So it's like, these guys are the bad guys, okay? Just so you know, cat got killed here. But what is kind of interesting is that the top bad guy, which is Silco, didn't exactly like get Deckard, who is the guy who fought with Vi early on, killed or anything. He didn't like murder that guy, but the guy gave him information. Okay, you got information, give food, you go away. So it's like, this guy isn't 100% evil, but that's, most people are not noticing this because the music and just the direction and just the pure menace of the guy's voice is like, this is like the big bad boss with the big bad scientist. And how could you get, even more like completely like top villain if you have like an underwater base here? This is like pure straight out of James Bond. So, you look at that and it's like, okay, this is just like pretty much clearly set up. Okay, so initially we thought, okay, the bad people were the people who are, at the top, Piltover, because they have these really arrogant, crappy cops who are like brutally killing people. So there is some sort of conflict going on there. But it's like, you got people like Grayson who are more pragmatic, and you got Vander, so maybe like something could possibly be worked out in some way. But then you got this, Silco guy who wants to go in and just kind of screw things up. So that's kind of like the story that we have initially set up. So that what we think here, okay, is the basic conflict is not exactly between the Undercity and Piltover. It's going to be between Vander, Vi, and Silco. And how is that actually going to come up? So it fairly seems to be very simple conflict. And that's what most normal people want. So at the end of this episode, basically the people who are the fanboys, they got to see the basic various items in Benzo's shop. So they're happy. You got the people who are interested in science fiction and fantasy because you got the big shots of the various worlds. It just very clearly, the world building around here is just wonderful. There are good character moments. People who just love storytelling got that. And it's the normal people who are just sitting in, just watching this story for the first time. It's like fairly straightforward. You have clear good guys, you have clear bad guys, you got just enough mystery here and there to make you wonder, okay, what is going to happen next? Which is all the first episode needs to do. Just those types of things. And that will, of course, set up for more normal people, or just more people who are not even interested in League of Legends, to start watching. And then it's a question of moving things along in episode 2, and then having a wonderful payoff in episode 3 for people to continually watch the rest up until 9. And that's what I think is, whatever you think about this, episode 1 does its job very well. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye.